Good morning. This is Kathleen Clow with the Great Basin Fire Potential Briefing for Wednesday, September 4th, 2024. The fire potential impacts for the next few days continue to include isolated dry and wet storms for northeastern Utah and western Wyoming on Wednesday, with the rest of the Great Basin experiencing warmer and drier weather as that ridge moves in. The high pressure system will settle in the Great Basin on Thursday, bringing warmer temperatures, low humidity, and light winds. On Friday, that next low pressure system begins making its way into western Nevada, where you can see the marked risk for isolated dry storms and isolated mixed storms across the Sierra Front. Additionally, we have marked areas of heavy smoke impact on Wednesday for the central Great Basin, including northern Nevada, southern Idaho, and northwestern Utah, and on Thursday for northwestern Nevada and western Idaho. Over the past 24 hours, you can see we've received a little bit heavier precip in southern Idaho, but most areas receiving a quarter of an inch or less, so not necessarily much of a wetting rain for most of the Great Basin. For our lightning for the past 24 hours, you can see those lingering storms that went through Utah yesterday, but most of our lightning has moved out of Idaho at this point, with just those last storms moving out of Utah. For our fire activity yesterday, we had 25 new starts for a total of 39.81 acres, and our large fire growth was another heavy day with 17,677 acres. For our past 7 days of precipitation, most of what we're seeing is what we got over the past 3 days, but you can see those heavier rains in the central Idaho mountains and a few heavier spots in northeastern Nevada, but overall, again, not much of a wetting rain for the Great Basin. And you can see we are still below on that percent of normal for the past 7 days. For our ERC point map, you can see those values did go down as we expected with this past 3 days of precip, but that won't remain for long. Those values will go back up with this ridge moving in as we'll see warmer temperatures and drier days. So expect those to come back up after today. For our smoke impacts, like we mentioned on our impact map, we're looking at another heavy smoke day today. So you can see on the left there, that's smoke for this afternoon. Pretty heavy smoke in southern Idaho all throughout, honestly, most of the Great Basin. We're getting some smoke along the Sierra Front from that new start in California, north of Lake Tahoe. And we're also getting some smoke from Oregon. This smoke will remain through tomorrow. You can see on the right here for tomorrow afternoon, another heavy smoke day as it kind of disperses out across the Great Basin. Here you can see that last round of mixed dry and wet isolated storms exiting northeastern Utah with warmer and drier air moving over most of the Great Basin with this ridge coming in. Also visible is that next low pressure system off the coast of northern California that will impact the Great Basin along the Sierra Front starting Friday. So we've got no risk for today, Wednesday, September 4th. Minimum relative humidities are back into the single digits and low double digits for most of Nevada and Utah, with higher values in the low to mid 20s up to 30% for northeastern Utah, western Wyoming, and central Idaho. As far as winds across the Great Basin for today, mostly light and variable, with some higher gusts seen in central and northeastern Utah from isolated storm outflows. So we're starting to see those relative humidities drop as this high pressure system moves back in. Temperatures for today are back on the rise after our last few days of storms, with highs in the upper 80s and low 90s for most of Nevada and southern Utah, and low to mid 80s for central Idaho. Most of the Great Basin will remain dry today with the potential for some mixed dry and wet isolated thunderstorms over eastern Utah as that low pressure system makes its final exit out of the area. For Thursday, that next high pressure system settles into the Great Basin, bringing warmer temperatures, lower relative humidities, and light variable winds. Rising temperatures and decreasing relative humidities could be a concern for our established fires, but overall not much of a concern risk-wise for Thursday. Relative humidities continue to fall Thursday, with humidities in the single digits to low teens for all of Nevada and southern Utah, and then in the mid-teens to low 20s for northern Utah, central southern Idaho, and western Wyoming. A few pockets of higher wind gusts across central and eastern Utah, but not much of a wind concern across the Great Basin for Thursday. High temperatures climb yet again on Thursday to the high 80s to mid 90s for most of the Great Basin, with a high of 92 in the central Idaho mountains, where we have a lot of our established fires. No chance for precipitation or storms on Thursday. On Friday, you can see that low beginning to impact the Sierra Front in western Nevada, bringing a risk for isolated dry and wet thunderstorms, which you can see on our fire potential map here on the right, while the rest of the Great Basin remains warm and dry. Relative humidities continue to fall across most of the Great Basin, especially in central and southern Idaho, as this high pressure system persists across most of the area. Minimum relative humidities range from the single digits and mid teens for most of the Great Basin on Friday. Strong wind gusts are seen across the Sierra Front on Friday due to storm outflow from that low pressure system moving into the area, but overall, wind is not a concern for the rest of the Great Basin. For the next 3 days of precipitation, you can see a small amount of precip in northeastern Utah, which we'll be seeing today as that system makes its final exit out of the Great Basin. And then you can see some low precipitation across the Sierra Front, which we are expecting on Friday as that next low starts making its way into western Nevada. Otherwise, most of the Great Basin remains dry over the next 3 days. As that low continues to move through the Great Basin on Saturday, we have marked areas of lightning risk across all of central Nevada, as well as a risk of high winds in western Nevada along the Sierra Front. On Sunday, that low pressure system continues to move east, bringing a risk of lightning and storms to southwestern Idaho. That wind risk along the Sierra Front remains in place on Sunday as well, and you can see this on our fire potential map on the right. On Monday, that high wind risk persists again along the Sierra Front with the potential for some mixed wet storms developing across most of the Great Basin as this low pressure system continues to move through the area. And you can see that in those pockets of black on the map on the left there. By Tuesday, warm and dry air settles over most of the Great Basin with the potential for some mixed wet dry storms from northeastern Nevada to southeastern Idaho. We will continue to monitor wind and lightning risk for Tuesday, but as of right now, no high risk triggers on that 7-day potential. For our 7-day precip, we see the areas we talked about with the 3-day over eastern Idaho and western Nevada. Additionally visible is the precipitation from that low pressure system moving through the area Saturday through Wednesday, which will bring more isolated wet and dry storms to most of the Great Basin. For our 8 to 14-day temperature outlook, we will be above average for all of the Great Basin yet again. The precipitation outlook has precip approaching near normal to above normal precipitation for most of Nevada and Idaho from these recent bands of rain, but still below normal for Utah and western Wyoming. That concludes today's fire potential briefing. Please check back tomorrow for the latest updates.